Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, the Town Crier. I'm your host, Roger Landry, the founder and managing director of the Liberty Beacon Project. Nothing gives me a better sense of fulfillment. And I sure hope so, because I work twice as many hours now that I'm retired than I ever did when I was getting paid to do something like this, which I never really did anything like this. But we've had some great discussions over the last couple of weeks. We've spoken in the political realm. We've spoken in the health realm. We talked about, and I've used the word over and over again for years, we talk about the elites or the elitist. And we talk about their plans for society, and we talk about their self-centered wishes and their greed and so on and so forth. I got a couple of comments from random people over the last week on the last couple of shows I've been doing, and those comments tended to focus in this direction. We always talk about the elites. Roger, you're always talking about who are they? What did they say? Why do you think of them this way? And these are valid questions. If and when you have Pied Pipers like myself, okay, or hoping to be, at least in a good fashion, we need to be held accountable. If we're stating something, there needs to be a reason. There has to be functionality to our message. It has to be discernible to the lowest common denominator. Okay. So, what did I decide to do? I decided to go and grab an article that the Liberty Beacon had put out, I think, almost a year ago. But it's perfect, okay? Because the attitudes of these people and the reason where we are today is not because of something that happened a week ago, or a month ago, or a year ago, or a decade ago. Believe it or not, we're talking about a century or two ago, which is when all of this started. And if you think that that's wrong, you need to do some research. So let's trip a little bit into the elite's agenda revealed in 22 quotes. Now, I write the forward, I write the post commentary on this. But we always give credit where credit is due, because Dan Asmussen grabbed a hold of these quotes and stuffed them under my face a while back, and I was so impressed that I had to turn this into an article. And again, Daniel is probably one of the best researchers I've ever seen. Extremely intelligent individual and patriotic from the very first breath he draws every morning. Okay, enough about Dan, because he's probably blushing. But again, let's go over this title, because we're going to tell you today who these elitists are, or at least some of them. And why do we say they have agendas? Let's go to their words, exactly what they said. And I will try, I can't guarantee I won't, but I will try not to dissect too much of it, okay? Or over-amplify too much of it. So let's trip into the elite's agenda revealed in 22 quotes. Is there any doubt about what is being perpetrated on we the people? and indeed the people of the world via the termed the elite. Okay, here we go. If you have any doubts, then the thoughts and quotes of these individuals should make your, I don't know, it should shake you to your foundation. None of the major events that have been, I don't know, that humanity has lived through, that has rocked civilization in the past few centuries, has been by accident. And again, you heard that in my opening. Or via a natural evolution. And the future is already planned, just not by or for us. Again, Dan Asmussen has managed to collect some of the best quotes to make this readily apparent to you, so please listen up. Again, 22 quotes compiled by the elitist cast, compiled by TLB contributing writer Dan Asmussen. Number one, in the next century, nations as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. National sovereignty wasn't such a great idea after all. Strobe Talbot, President Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, as quoted in Time magazine, July 20th, 1992. Okay, we see we have been seeing all the way up until what you see going across the globe lately, the big push for globalism. This is exactly what this quote is discussing. Globalism. All right? It's being pushed back against across the planet today. So again, these elitists may say what they wish, and we all saw this happening. How long has the Liberty Beacon Project and so many other really good independent media sources been talking about globalism and the tyranny of globalism and them taking away our, I don't know, our national heritage? And the only way a government like that can possibly work is if it is based on a communist style format. And we've also discussed that in the past. So let's go on to number two. The American people will never knowingly adopt socialism. But under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened. Norman Thomas, for many years, U.S. socialist presidential candidate. And you cannot for 1 second look around you today, if you are a baby boomer or close to it, and not see the truth in this. It is more every day about the society and less about the individual. The reason the United States of America was never set up as a democracy, but as a republic, a constitutional republic, was because in a democracy, it is the majority that everything is focused on, not the individual. So tyranny prevails at the individual level. This is what socialism is. And this is exactly where we're going. You can't say that here. There's a free speech zone over there. You need to do this. You need to provide this, so on and so forth, to the point where the government literally owns and runs us. Number three, today the path of total dictatorship in the United States can be laid by strictly legal means, unseen and unheard by the Congress, the president, or the people. Outwardly, we have a constitutional government. We have operating within our government and political system another body representing another form of government, a bureaucratic elite. This was Senator William Jenner in 1954, about the time Eisenhower was starting to open his eyes. And remember, when he left office, his famous military-industrial complex speech about being careful about the power they were gaining. What most Americans don't know is that is not what the original, what I saw when I was a kid. That wasn't it. Okay? What this guy said and what was cut out after the original broadcast on every tape going forward was also about a 2-minute dissertation on the threat of the big pharmaceutical industry. And today, two of the three biggest influences on the planet to the US government, and I'll give you the top three, okay? Big Pharma, APAC, military industrial complex. So, did this guy have, I don't know, did he have a crystal ball? Because you tell me that's not exactly where we're sitting. We have different names for it today. We call it the shadow government. We call it the deep state. And anybody who is listening to this show and has not heard either one of those terms, please stay out from under that rock you're hiding under. Because everybody today knows what the shadow government is, or, okay, let's go to number 4. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. Remember that number. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards world government. The supernatural sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. David Rockefeller, Baden-Baden, Germany, 1991. Listen to what I just said. Think about it. 40 years ago, these periodicals and this mainstream media were attending meetings of the Bilderberg Group and these type organizations and not saying a word for 4 decades as a group of elitists, self-proclaimed elitists. Let me read the last freaking paragraph again. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination. That's you and me. We're autodetermination. Practice in past centuries. He clearly states, thank you to the mainstream media for not blowing the whistle while a bunch of us elitists figure out how to take over the planet from those it rightfully belongs to. You and me. Read this. I dare anybody to read this and define it any differently. Because if you think you can, I would like to hear it. I would really like to hear it. Number 5, the real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the larger centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. A letter written by FDR to Colonel House, November 21st, 1933. Okay. He's absolutely right. He is absolutely right, because what we call the Federal Reserve, the central bank in the United States, is the third iteration. The third iteration. Okay? Not the first, not the second, the third. The first 2 failed. But what did they do? They planted enough seed of corruption into the government going forward that its success was inevitable. He flat out states here that there are larger centers in the government that are wholly owned. I can't even fathom what most people out there are thinking about this. Is it a reality or isn't a reality? Okay, we're going to have to move forward. Number 6, the depression. The depression that most of you probably haven't got a clue about, but Our parents lived through it. My parents, I'm a baby boomer. I'm 64, almost 65 years old. So we remember we don't have personal memory, but we are aware of what the Depression was. And there are a few alive today who were um, experiencing probably one of the worst economic times in the United States in modern history. Okay. The Depression was the calculated shearing of the public by the world money powers, triggered by the planned sudden shortage of supply of call money in the New York money market. The one world government leaders and their ever close bankers have now acquired full control of the money and credit machinery of the U.S. via the creation of the privately owned Federal Reserve. This is Curtis Dahl, FDR's son-in-law, as quoted in his book, My Exploited Father-in-Law. Did you hear what I just said? I'm going to tell you something, and I dare someone again to challenge me on this, okay? Every single recession, every single depression, every single major financial tripping point in the economy of any major nation on this planet has been planned, has been choreographed. Do you know what a bellows is? It's a little thing that looks like an accordion with handles on the back and a little snout on the front, and people used to use it and they pump it to blow air into a fire with hot embers where the fire had gone out, and that air moving across those hot embers would reignite the flame. That was a bellows. So when it was sucking air in, it was accomplishing something. When it was pushing air out, when you're pumping it together, it was accomplishing something. Every recession and every depression was meant to pump money out of your pocket and my pocket into their pockets. And it has been working for 2 centuries. When are we going to get smart enough to see this? Gee, maybe when somebody says it to us in plain English? Didn't I just read that to you? Number 7, the New Deal is plainly an attempt to achieve a working socialism and avert a social collapse in America. It is extraordinarily parallel to the successive policies and plans of the Russian parliament. Americans shirk the word socialism. But what else can one call it? This was H.G. Wells' The New World Order in 1939. Okay, the New Deal was socialism. The New Deal was you will work for the government, for the CCC or the PPP, and they had 1,000 different triple-digit initials back then for all the plans to recover from the Depression. And it was all run by the government. And you owed your life and your soul to the government. Are we sounding like socialism here, people? So Mr. H.G. Wells hit the nail right on the head. All right? He hit the nail right on the head. But this is something that if we discuss it today, people look at us like we're some kind of a conspiracy nut. Okay, some of us are nuts, but this just isn't a conspiracy anymore. And it's definitely not a theory. Okay? The conspiracy resides within those who are actually making this happen, not us. And there's enough proof out there to prove that the theory part of this doesn't work anymore either. Number 8, ultimately our objective is to welcome the Soviet Union back into the world order. Perhaps the world order of the future will truly be a family of nations. George W. Bush, Texas A&M University, 1989. Number 9, under socialism, you would not be allowed to be poor. You would be forcibly fed, clothed, lodged, taught, and employed whether you liked it or not. And if it were discovered that you had not the character and industry enough to be worth all this trouble, you might possibly be executed in a kindly manner. Fabian socialist Bernard Shaw, in his Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism, 1928. You tell me that until I told you that, I couldn't have picked that out of so many periodicals or articles today. Number 10. We're almost halfway done. We are moving toward a new world order. The world of communism. We shall never turn off that road. Mikhail Gorbachev, 1987. Gee, about the time we're seeing the collapse of the Soviet Union. But is he right? What did he know that we don't know? That the only way a global system of governance can work is if it is a communist-style government. And this is what he was alluding to. And he was alluding to it long before conspiracy theorists like myself and so many other great independent media sources were heralding this exact same issue. Number 11, National Socialism will use its own revolution for establishing a new world order. Adolf Hitler during World War II. National Socialism will use its own revolution for establishing a new world order. Just got done telling you that the Americans will never accept socialism, but they will accept something called liberalism, even though they're exactly the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. And National Socialism is, guess what? National Socialism will use its own revolution for establishing a new world order. We have seen that in America. We have seen it across Europe. We have seen it coming up through the South America and Mexico. We have seen this, and the world is growing tired of it and pushing back at an ever-increasing pace. Again, just because these comments and statements are made and made by some of those we deem elitist doesn't mean it has to be true or has to come to fruition. Again, as you're seeing, some of these comments were made a long time ago, and history has not been favorable to them. Number 12, I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government of free opinion by free opinion, no longer a government of conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Would you believe me if I told you, I don't know, that this was Mikhail Gorbachev? Would you believe me if I told you that this was, I don't know, Winston Churchill? How about if I told you this was President Woodrow Wilson in 1916, 3 years after signing America away to the banksters, 3 years after instituting the Federal Reserve Program. And to his dying day, he regretted it as the worst thing that had been done to this country in his memory. Okay. And he tells you, this is a guy who was the President of the United States and oversaw several, like the Income Tax Act, the Federal Reserve Act, some of the worst turnings in the history of this country, and eventually tried to atone via words. I would look at all of the damage that the tax policy and the Federal Reserve have done to this nation and, I don't know, by default, the planet, and say, Mr. Wilson, there is no forgiveness for this. It is a catastrophe of such enormous proportions that I don't have time to describe it. So we'll go to number 13. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be revolution before tomorrow morning. Henry Ford. Henry Ford, looking back at the absolute takeover of the complete economic structure of this country by a few behind-the-scenes shadow government personnel, of which Henry Ford was one of them. And he was absolutely right. If the treason that was happening had been made apparent, there would have been revolution in the streets. The drive, number 14, the drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one-world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. Congressman Larry P. McDonald, 1976, killed in Korean Airlines 747 that was shot down by the Soviets, which they claim they can prove they didn't do. But he was on his way to say things. This is a congressman, and I'm going to read the beginning of this again. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one-world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Okay. Bang, bang, you're dead. Shoot a whole plane down. That's exactly what they did with a missile. And I don't know. Every time I go over this list, it really, really chokes me up. Number 15. Some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. David Rockefeller, Memoirs, page 405. This is the guy who thanked the mainstream media for 40 years for not telling anybody about their plans to take over the world and take power away from you and me and control us in a communist fashion. This is also the same guy who this Congressman Larry P. McDonald was talking about until his plane got shot down by what was supposedly a Soviet missile, which to this day, I don't believe it was. Are you seeing? I'm going on number 16, and what I have told you, what I have showed you is the words of, not me, not third or fourth or fifth hand, from their memoirs, from published documents. This is what these people are saying. So the next time I refer to these things, or I talk about the elitist way of thinking, or I talk about don't come down on my shit, please. Because I'm giving you their words. Number 16. It is the system of nationalist individualism that has to go. We are living in the end of the sovereign states. In the great struggle to evoke a westernized world socialism, contemporary governments may vanish. Countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting against it. H.G. Wells, in his book, The New World Order in 1940, again, I wish I would have had that crystal ball. I wish. Number 17, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. Brock Adams, Director of UN Health Organization. Okay. In order to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men individualism, loyalty to family, and national patriotism. Okay, what are globalists? Globalists are all about the society, screw the individual. Globalists are all about, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, you should be able to live anywhere you want. There should be no boundaries, no nothing. It doesn't work. And if you're Catholic or if you're a Hindu, screw you, because we don't tolerate religion anymore. These are the people who run the World Health Organization directorate. And I go on. Number 18, we need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. We need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. We must electronically control the brain. Someday, armies and generals will be controlled by electronic stimulation of the brain. Dr. Jose M.R. Delgado, Director of Psychiatry, Yale University Medical School, Congressional Record number 26, Volume 118, February 24th, 1974. Gee, I bet you thought I was talking about something like from the Hitler era. This is from the Congressional Record in 1974 by a doctor who, the director of neuropsychotherapy at Yale University. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. We must electronically control their brain. I'm going to drop that. 19. One of the least understood strategies of the world revolution, now moving rapidly towards its goal, is the use of mind control as a major means of obtaining the consent of people who will be subjects of the New World Order. I'm going to read that again, a little slower. One of the least understood strategies of the world revolution, now moving rapidly toward its goals, is the use of mind control as a major means of obtaining the consent of the people who will be the subjects in the New World Order. The national educator, K.M. Heaton. Number 20. Okay. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. David Rockefeller. I'm going to tell you what that was supposed to be. because that had been choreographed for many, many, many years. And I'm going to do an entire show on this. That was 9/11. That was the catalyst. There was supposed to be the inevitable takedown of 7 nations, starting in the Middle East, of which 5 of them exist there. All of them, one of the first things to be accomplished was the institution of a Federal Reserve style bank, because none of them had one. This was all supposed to be done via that mechanism of transformation. The world was supposed to be terrorized. The war on terror was supposed to consume our psyches, and it did for a big chunk of time. And then we saw mass migrations, and then we saw. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. And we were well on the way to it for about 15 years, until about 2017, when people's eyeballs, maybe 2016, the beginning of the Trump era, when people's eyeballs started opening up, not just in the United States, but globally. All the way up until that point, it was an inevitability. If Hillary Clinton would have been elected, the United States would be part of, and probably the biggest cog in the wheel of, global governance today. There's no doubt about that. None. None. The cog in the wheel right now. What's blocking everything is the Trump factor. And whether he is what he says he is, or is in fact a tyrant riding a good wave, it is what you and I think that matter. And there is an awakening population, and it is spreading across the planet like wildfire. Italy is pushing back. Rome is on fire. The United States is pushing back. The Canadians are pushing back. The Brits are pushing back. Need I go on? The French are pushing back. And it's all people like you and me everywhere across the planet. So, have we thrown or poked a stick into the cog of those wheels so they don't turn anymore? Okay. I'm going to get to the last 2. This one bothers me every single time I read it. And I want you to listen to it, because I don't make these things up. Okay? No one will enter the New World Order unless he or she will make a pledge to worship Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he will take a Luciferian initiation. David Spangler, Directory of Planetary Initiative, United Nations. Did you hear what I just said? Would you believe me if I told you, and I published an article about this on the Liberty Beacon, that there are Satan worship after school classes opening up around the country? At your local school. Satan worship after school classes. Okay. That comment I just read, and I hate it, but I'll read it again. No one will enter the New World Order unless he or she will make a pledge of worship to Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he or she will take a Luciferian initiation. David Spangler, Director of Planetary Initiative, United Nations. Number 22. Excuse me. Today, America will be outraged. They would be if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they are told that there were an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated. That threat, our very existence. Let me go over that again. Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there were an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened their very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government. Dr. Henry Kissinger, Bilderberg Conference, Evans, France, 1991. Now, the reason I read the first part twice is because you really needed to understand what I just said to you, okay? There needs to be a boogeyman. There needs to be a boogeyman, and that boogeyman was the Muslim world. That boogeyman, this speech was given in 1991. There needs to be an existential threat from the outside. And then we had 9/11. And then we had Desert Storm. And then we had this attack and that attack. And then we saw what? We saw terrorist bombings in London, terrorist bombings in Moscow, terrorist bombings in the United States. Need I go on? This was choreographed for at least a decade, maybe two, before it ever took place. This was the power structure's way of turning America's course, and indeed humanity's course, to the one they wished. Let me explain something to you. Having worked for the military and mostly on Navy projects, I can tell you that something as large as a submarine or an aircraft carrier per se doesn't make hairpin turns. It might take a mile or so for an aircraft carrier to make a turnaround, or even a right hand or a left hand 90-degree turn. Okay? It doesn't happen quickly. But when you've got the power of 3 or 4 nuclear reactors behind you pushing, you can accomplish anything. Okay. We're looking at a situation where they needed an event. They needed an event to promulgate the entire historical change in humanity's direction. Can you name anything that has happened in the last half century that even comes close to the effect that 9/11 had on this planet and especially on America? When we talk about in this paragraph from Dr. Henry Kissinger, people will readily give up their rights if they feel it will grant or get them protection, guarantee them protection and comfort from this enemy. Do you remember the Patriot Act? Do you remember the NDAA? Do you remember the president giving himself the right and the ability to lock American citizens up forever without due process, or to assassinate American citizens without due process? Do you remember the NDAA getting passed and then Obama running on the platform to do away with it, and then not only passing it but strengthening it? The American people at that point in time were doing exactly what Dr. Kissinger was saying by not rising up and saying, you will not take our rights away, by passively acquiescing to these political actions in our name. We acquiesced our rights. You are looking at the wanton destruction of all of our rights. And it is being done at the pleasure of those who seek to rule humanity. But don't confuse this, because they're not being taken away from us. They can't be taken away from us. We are America's sovereigns. We can only willingly acquiesce them, or through ignorance allow them to be acquiesced. And this is exactly what's happening. We're going to wake up in a totalitarian country in the near future, and it will be our fault. Everything I just said to you will be our fault. At any point in time, enough people in this country could stand up and say, this is bullshit. It's done. This isn't the country our founders gave us. This isn't the monetary system that our founders gave us. This isn't the system of education that our founders gave us. And this isn't the freedom that our founders gave us. And we're done with it. And on that day, it will be over. But we sit, those of us who are awake and aware, amongst far too many who have totally forgotten and fear a government that is in fact their servant. Wake the hell up! They work for you! A vital point that all must understand is that the USA has not been an actual republic since the Act of 1871. This is a reminder, people, just a reminder. Okay? At which time, through the most heinous display of treason against the American people, okay, the United States was sold out to the globalist elites. America is indeed a corporation owned by many of the same elitist bankers and power brokers presented in the comments, the 22 comments I just gave you. Please do some research. This is the reason they feel it is their right to literally rule over us. Still think any Congress or president is actually in charge? Do you? Even Trump. Because if you do, think again. Understand that there are many more applicable quotes to reinforce all of these themes that we've been presenting to you for weeks or months or years. We are looking at a caste that thinks in decades, generations, or even centuries, not days, not months, not years. We, the people, face a project that is literally centuries in the making, with the brain power and the resources to literally reshape the world in their images or desires. Those who truly believe it is their right to play God with all of humanity. My friends, it's well past time to wake up. And as usual, I stuck a meme in here, and I'd like to go out with this meme. When the course of a nation is unjustly navigated by the lies and deceit of powerful and subversive entities titled the deep state or the shadow government, instead of by the will and voice of the people via a duly elected representative, and when this duly elected representative is continuously and effectively stalled or blocked from instituting the voice of said people because of these entities, let it be known we are not discussing a totalitarian banana republic or an authoritarian dictatorship. Welcome to America, where the true power and authority of we the people is now proven to be all but worthless. Are you angry yet? Wake the hell up. This is Roger Landry. This has been another episode of Eradicating Programmed Ignorance, the Town Crier. I very, very much appreciate you listening. I do. And for all the people who work so hard in TLBTV, like Rebecca Mahan and Luca Magino, who are two absolutely shining stars in the production of all of our media, and all of the great hosts who host their shows on TLBTV, and all of the great contributors who put articles on our many websites across the planet. It is because of you that we can eradicate programmed ignorance. Have a great night, all.